Welcome Tish and Anne, Susan, hi, and Michelle, welcome. And and then there's a bunch of other people watching as well. So welcome to Detailed Amsterdam number 7. I'm pretty sure you've met me before. If you haven't, I'm Mark, tour guide based in Amsterdam. And this is a slow walk around Amsterdam, just looking for interesting details. Now, I always start the next one where I ended the last one. So here I am outside the pub, the cafe called the Cat in the Vineyard. And we're going to be spending our time in the Jordaan district again. So welcome, and let's get on with it. Now, this canal is called the Lindengracht. Head over and show you the name. Gracht means canal. So it was obviously a canal, but it was filled in like so many. Excuse me. And named after the linden tree. Now, the Jordaan district. It's such a cool area. And it was the old workers district, kind of the heart of Amsterdam. And I'd like to talk about something that's called the Paling Oproer. And that means the eel riots. And they happened right here. Okay, there was a pretty horrible tradition, a traditional game actually, and a rope was strung over the canal, like from there right across, from side to side, and a live eel would be hung from the rope, and then people would come by boat underneath it, and they would try and hang on to it, and they would end up falling in the water. Now this sport was banned because of its cruelty. But it was still very much popular in this neighborhood. And on a Sunday, July the 25th, 1886, they were having an illegal game of, this illegal game of whatever you want to call it, live eel pulling. And the police came and they tried to break it up. And there was a serious riot that followed. There were barricades. There were rocks thrown. People were breaking up the streets and breaking the rocks into smaller pieces, pelting the police with stones. The army was called in. The riots actually went on for a couple of days, hey? And it was 26 people were killed. I mean, that's crazy. You can't even imagine that now. Now, why? I mean, it wasn't really about the game. It was about, already pent-up anger about the equality, not the equality, the inequality that they had here in the 1800s, because the poor were really terribly, terribly, terribly poor, and many of them were living in squalor, and the rich were often seriously rich. So, you get big disparities in wealth, and you're going to get that kind of thing. There's kind of quite a protest culture here, I must say. It doesn't come out of nowhere. If you look back in Dutch history, there's lots of riots and protests about things. Now, I'm doing something different I don't normally do. I'm actually tracking back on myself. You see here is the butchery, the fattened pig, because I want to show you something. And just a couple of things I pointed out last week, which I got around to going to. I went round to Mama's koelkast, so Mum's refrigerator, and I bought some food there, and it was just great. So, cooked by an Indian lady, like her family recipes, and she had a fridge there, so I know a bit more about how it works now. And I'll show you through the window just again. So these ladies from different parts of the world who live here have their own refrigerator, and they cook these meals, and then you go and you open her fridge and you decide what you want to eat. And I bought a really nice buttered chicken curry. That was the middle fridge, this one here, and there's her face on the fridge actually. It's really cool. Let me zoom in. I won't zoom because it's too indistinct. And it was delicious. It was really lovely home-cooked food. So there's 3 fridges and there's still one open. So they're looking for another mama. And I did actually have coffee at Bruno's, and it was brilliant. I had a flat white, and he has coffee from different parts of the world. And he explains all the different characters of it and the flavors and the nuances. So I've had one, the fruitier one, and I'm going to work my way through, definitely. Now here is Willemstraat, and this is the street I want to go down and show you something. This is the street that was originally called Lindengracht, so that's the Marigold Hotel. So I got hay fever, my brain's not working properly. The Marigold Canal. I was thinking of that film, you know, the Great Hotel, I don't know, something about a grand hotel, and I'm sure there's Marigold in there somewhere. It was built in 1857, and it was actually more of a ditch than a hotel. Now, I don't normally use my tablet when it's sunny because I don't know how well it's going to work. But I'd like to show you a photograph, or not a photograph, a drawing of what it was like in those years. So let's see if I can do this. Okay. I'll just find somewhere there's not too much back reflection. So just taking this view here, yeah? And here is actually what it looked like. So not even a canal. And very much just a ditch, and very grubby, and no doubt exceptionally smelly. Because there was little flow, not much flow through here, which is pretty much why they, ended up filling in these things anyway. It's not for nothing. So, when it was filled in, they had an opening party when, the road was opened, and it happened to be the birthday of King Willem I. So they called it Willemstraat, Willem Street. Now, famously in 1775, this was already the center of the slum district. And there were 57 corridors, they were called, in the street. Now, these corridors led to enclosed backyards. And what they did is, and the people in those backyards lived in these really dilapidated conditions. It was terrible. So here we have, this is where one of the passages was, the corridors. You can see it here. And this one was called the cloister, and you can see there were these house numbers, and there were 7 houses, 4 toilets. Oh no, 7 Punden, that doesn't, well there's 12 houses, 37 inhabitants and 4 toilets. So they had it good, okay. You can see the outline here of where the buildings came to. And here's the next one. Lange Siewertsgang. This is named after a person. 4 properties, 7 apartments, 24 inhabitants, and 0 toilets. Okay, imagine living in a house with no toilet. Okay. And this is also named after somebody, Lobbertjesgang. 4 buildings, 11 houses, 54 people in 11 houses. And they were small, these houses, huh? And there's 2 more. I'm not going to stop at each one. But what I do want to show you, just one last picture on the tablet. Now, I know from experience, so it's very noisy, scooters going by. I know from experience that when I show this photo, I've done it before on tours, everyone goes, ooh, it's so gross. And it is gross, but it's history. So here we go. I want to show you the different types of toilets that they have. This was the old school here. This one. Now you see, there's the sink, and there's the chopping board, yeah? I can't point because I got my hands full. That chopping board lifts away, and then underneath is a round lid, and you would take that lid off and sit there to go to the toilet, and underneath it would be a bucket. And look how fancy they got a generation later. An actual flushing toilet in the kitchen. I mean, it is crazy to think that's how it was. But yeah, it was a very, very, very poor area. You can see why there was a certain amount of dissatisfaction. And here are some pictures on the wall from that period as part of, this gives you an idea here, all the green sections are those corridors. And the area inside, let me just try and point to one. This area, so this corridor went down to here, and this would be referred to as a fort. So these were considered different forts, were the names they were given. Many people in one property. And then there's bicycles everywhere. You can really get an idea of the condition here. And where Lange Seward slum, where we just were, an example of what it looked like in there. So yeah, very much the slum of Amsterdam. Hey. Can you imagine having a toilet in the kitchen? I mean, it's just unthinkable, isn't it? Anyway, we'll come back. I'm going to show you one of these gangen on the next canal that still exists. Well, the corridor still exists anyway. But onto this right opposite. Interesting, this. It says Vereniging tot Heil des Volks. And what this means is to the salvation of the people. Now, there were a lot of organizations in Amsterdam working with the poor. It was certainly seen as something that was a duty. Also in Protestant Amsterdam, it was fine to be rich, but you had to do good stuff with your money. I would say you got to be a bit more like Bill Gates and a bit less like Elon Musk, I suppose, Jeff Bezos. So, where are we with this? This says Bewaarschool, and that was actually, that meant a kindergarten before they came up with that word. So it was a preschool for kids of 3 to 6 years. In this area, there were 80,000 people living. Now, post-war, after the gentrification, there's only 20,000. So that gives you some idea of how it's gentrified. Now, this organization is still going. It's a Christian evangelical organization. So very much aimed at helping reduce poverty, but it does have something of a checkered past. During the Second World War, they did a lot of wonderful resistance work. More recently, they've been focusing on trying to save sex workers, addicts, children in poverty, and the homeless. And you might think, well, that doesn't sound so bad. It doesn't. But, you know, their employees were receiving municipal subsidies in many places, and they were really just being funded by the towns, and they were going out and evangelizing. So that wasn't really part of the deal. So they've actually lost a lot of subsidies in different places. By the way, it's a lovely Monday evening, and yeah, it's just the most gorgeous day in Amsterdam. It's good weather. It's been a long time coming. Okay, so a great little street, and I think the next street parallel to this I get to has become one of my favorite streets in Amsterdam, I must say. Check out, you do get a bit of modern stuff here, and modern buildings, and I spied at the top of this what looks like the most amazing terrace, roof terrace up there, just tucked away, and it gets the evening sun. How cool is that? Hello, Natalie and Helene, and baby girl's mom. Hi. Okay, so now we're back on the Brouwersgracht. Last week I did some on that section up there. This section here is almost all warehouses from the 1600s. In really beautiful restored condition. Quite amazing. Showed off to their best advantage in the lovely evening sun. There's one coming up with the turquoise windows where that burned down and it was replaced by this kind of industrial building from the early 1900s. You can see there on the right. That kind of just emphasizes, it's quite nice, I suppose, lovely big windows, but it does really emphasize the beauty of the old ones, doesn't it? And check this out. I love seeing works on the canals. You know, you can actually really see how the canals are used. The canal walls in so many places need to be rebuilt. So to do that, they'll have these great big floating platforms. And over there is a vertical strut which then goes down and stands on the bottom of the canal. A really good use of space. Okie dokie. Let's see. Lovely Surinamese takeaway place. Here's one of my general stops at Christmas time. A stocking filler shop of fancy olive oils and mustards and vinegars. So, okay. So the motorbike seemed to get upset, but the car actually had the right of way because the car was coming in from the right. And somebody is saying, no wonder the canals are stinky with no toilets. Absolutely. You know, a lot of those buckets would be emptied into the canals. There would be actually a car going around to collect them, but a lot ended up in the canals. And a pudding shop. Look at that. Oh, and what a nice reflection in the window. And you get to see me. Hello. Sweet Bob. Okay. And how cool is this white wisteria? Wisteria grows like a weed in Amsterdam, it really does. It does so well in the very, very poor sandy soil. Amazing. Not a bad place to have a beer, hey? This is a great bar for pub quizzes. So it's called Café Thijssen. Thijssen, Thijson. And it was named after Teo Thijssen. Or in English, you'll say Theo. We don't pronounce the H here. And let me just show you the front of the cafe. There you go. And here's a statue of Teo Thijssen. Handily, you can see the years that he lived, so I don't have to remember that kind of thing. Now, he was quite a dude. I mean, he was a writer, he was an educator, he was a good old socialist politician. He was a member of the Social Democratic Workers' Party. And besides that, he was, and I didn't even know about this until I researched this, he was an Esperantist. I just wonder, has anyone heard of Esperanto? Any of you? Esperanto was new to me. Now, Esperanto was created, yeah, excellent, Tish. Wow, cool. You know what, Tish? You get the slicey this week. How's about that? So if you can reach out to me, I'll send a slicey over to you. Because, wow, that's so cool. Yeah, so it was this made-up artificial international language that was meant to make communication between people, between particularly workers, easier. It's a pleasure, Tish. Thanks for coming on so many of my tours for such a long time. So yeah, the person who invented Esperanto was a Polish-Jewish ophthalmologist called Laser Zamenhof. And actually there's a Zamenhof-Straat near me, so it's obviously named after him. Now this statue here is referring to Teo Thijssen's writing about education. So he thought more emphasis should be put on the student as the individual. That's really what's coming across here. And he was very critical of like super generalized, top-down imposed educational policy. He thought that class teachers were the best positioned to make decisions for their particular class of how to educate these kids better. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so a little gable stone here. I can't resist. It's it's a windmill. It's a sawmill, actually. There used to be so many sawmills just on the outskirts of Amsterdam, and this is just a reference to one of those. Let me zoom in a little, see how well the zoom is working today. Hey, it works quite well today. So there's a sawmill. Somebody's just writing a comment. I'll just read it out in case people don't have the chat for future viewers. There's an area where I live exactly like that called the Yards. They only removed it because it made the market smelly. Our schools were called ragged schools. So, you know, when I first lived in Amsterdam in the early 90s, I lived in the Staatsliederbuurt, not so far from here. And I did have a toilet, which was in a separate little room in the place I was staying. But there was no bathtub or no shower. And thankfully there was warm water at the kitchen sink, and I used to get a galvanized tub. Oh, and I also had a wood burner. So I'd go out collecting wood and chop it up, saw it up and get warm logs, and then burn it on the wood burner and get warm again, having a bath in a galvanized tub. So that was one of the old sort of social houses before being renovated. And so yeah, I mean, there's none of those left anymore, I don't think. I love this window here. It's so unusual for Amsterdam. It's like almost a Diocletian window. If it was flat across the bottom, it would be pure Diocletian window. And it's just amazing how these classical motifs just work their way into buildings all over the world. Okay, so when I was walking along here, looking about things I was going to talk about, I noticed this funny little alleyway. And this guy just happened to be coming out of the doorway, and he saw me looking down, and because he's an Amsterdammer, he's friendly. And I said, wow, is this like one of the old corridors? And he went, yeah, absolutely. And this one here is, they put the old name back, and it's Schuitenvoerdersgang, which means barge captain's alley. So this is the sort of thing you would have seen, little corridors like this, leading down, houses on each side, doors on each side, then leading into the courtyard or the yard behind, creating the whole fort. So yeah, this is how it was. Okay. So many trees out. Does anyone know what this bush is called? Because I used to have one and I can't remember, and I've forgotten for years. It was part of a hedge. And for ages I can never remember, and now I found one in bloom. So if you could tell me, I'll probably remember for the next 5 years. Anyone know? More wisteria. And I think I need to go another block for the next thing I've found. Lovely sunshine the other side of the street. Oh, thank you. Okay, so yes, that's it. Cyanosis. Great. Sorry, that wasn't a quiz question, by the way. But yes, that does bring back, it triggers an ancient old memory. Cyanosis. Okay. Check out the roses here. I mean, they say one of the theories is why the area was called the Jordaan, is it was a play on Jordaan. I don't think it's true. And it was said in like a sarcastic way because of how smelly the area was. It really wasn't like a garden at all. But now, with the gentrification, of course, all that's changed. Let's have some pink roses against a blue sky. How's about that? Okay. So here we are on Eerste Goudbloemdwarsstraat. So from last week, you will know, oh, red roses as well, check these out. That means the first marigold cross street. Now there's a pretty cool, oh, this is also pretty with quite a historic building here. There's me. Okay, so a very famous writer called Israel Querido lived here. Now, he was from a Jewish family. He was a watchmaker, a violinist, a diamond worker, a jeweler, a journalist, an author, and yeah, talk about multi-talented. And he actually moved into this district, not this house here, it's a rebuild by the look of it, but to get to know the Jordaan family as well, their culture, and he wrote a 4-part book about it called De Jordaan. And yes, Teo Thijssen, and certainly also, here's his name, Israel Querido, were very, very socialist in their outlook. Now, oops, let me just zoom out a bit, not get run over. Hey Alice, lovely to see you, thank you for joining. So yeah, there was an interesting thing here, you know, because there was, as I mentioned, this thing about if you were wealthy, you had to do good things with your money. So there was that kind of, how you say it, inclination towards philanthropy. And then coupled with that, there was this very strong socialist, communist workers movement here. And that was very much centered in this area as well. So I think those two things together is you kind of got it from both sides, you know. And I like to think that there is still a strong ethic here with that in the Netherlands. That's one of the benefits I see of the country, is that there is a feeling of that workers should not be exploited too much. And one should really look after the less fortunate in society as well. Now, here is the Lindengracht. That's it. Bit of fencing around it, unfortunately, but that doesn't matter, we can cope. This architecture here, well, actually, I'm skipping ahead before I tell you about it, what it looks like. Now, let's talk about how it started. So, 1616. So this area had only started being built just a couple of years before that, eh? In 1616, this plot here was bought by Anabaptists. And there were 20 small houses there. Now, Anabaptists, otherwise known as Mennonites. I'll just do a little slow pan around while I'm talking. Known as Mennonites, and they were followers of this guy Menno Simons. So he was a well-known Dutch reformer, much in the same vein, if you would, as say Luther or Calvin. And the Anabaptists believed in adult baptism. So you waited until you're an adult so you could make that type of informed decision. They were also anti-military service. They didn't want to bear arms. So that put them a little bit out of sync with the powers that were in the Dutch Republic. They couldn't openly practice their faith, much as if initially with Judaism and then also with Christianity, well, with Catholicism rather, you couldn't openly practice your faith for a long time. Now, they bought this land here and they had a hofje, an almshouse courtyard, and that was specifically for needy widows. And there were houses on each side and there were big lawns in the middle. And those were known as bleaching fields, because often people in these courtyards, they would bleach people's linen to make a bit of money, and you had to lay it down flat and let it lie in the sun. So those are like the bleaching fields. In 1801, let me zoom in on the board here. In 1801, it was bought by the RCOAK, that's Romeinse Katholieke Armse Kantoor, which is the Roman Catholic Old Poor Office in English. So this is a foundation to specifically support the elderly and the poor. And it's still going, and they also donate more widely now to other vulnerable groups. So it was a Catholic almshouse intended for elderly couples. Now, it got a new facade in the 1880s, and that is the style you're looking at here. So a bit neo-Gothic, a bit of neo-Renaissance look to it as well. And it has two gable stones from 2004. So this one is a reference to its original intended use. So there's two elderly people standing by a young tree. And this one over here, see there it says the Roman Catholic, I told you something, Oude Armse Kantoor, so Association for Helping the Aged and the Poor. And that's from 2004. Now this shows a fully grown tree with two children. And what that is talking about there is the old and the new purpose of the building. I'll zoom out a little bit. So the old purpose was to look after the elderly. And then in 2004, the new purpose was the building was actually run as a hospice for terminally ill children, so a children's hospice. And that was established. They got a lease from the Salvation Army to enable that. Now what's happening now is that there's another huge renovation happening because the Children's Hospice Organization is elsewhere, and it's being converted into 21 apartments. Just trying to zoom out. It's difficult sometimes zooming out. Also still run by the RCOAK, and those apartments are earmarked for people who work in care for the elderly, so that they can actually have a place to live in Amsterdam, which is close to their place of work. Got to get the zoom sorted because it's there we go. So you know, a lot of different and very worthwhile uses. I'm doing well with the hay fever today. So let's check out some orange roses, and then I want to show you one more building. And this color just caught my eye. Everybody's favorite color here. Okay. Now, obviously, when there were so many people in this area, 80,000, there were a lot of kids. And kids need to go to school. So there would obviously be a lot of schools. And this is a rather lovely building. This style of architecture is known as Amsterdam School. And even it's got nothing to do with the fact that it is a school. It's just called that. And it's kind of like the Amsterdam version of deco. You'll see some deco shapes here. And let me just zoom in for you. Really get that up here. Oops. Okay, a bit of gate detail. And it's still a school. It says up here, openbare school voor gewoon lage onderwijs, which is basically like a basic school, basisschool they would call it here, for youngsters. And what it says here on the left It says vroeg ploeg over here. The text says vroeg ploeg, and that is about sow early. Ploeg sounds a bit like plow, but it's about sowing the seeds of knowledge, basically. So start teaching children early. And then on the right it says Arbeid adelt, which is a phrase in Dutch which basically means work in nobles. In nobles. I had to ask my two Dutch neighbors today about that, and it took ages for them to explain it. But it's a nice example of Amsterdam School architecture of an actual school as well. I mean, it's really hard to zoom. Okay, there we go. So how's that for an interesting block, eh? I'm going to stop at, well, I'll just show you another little example of Amsterdam School architecture. Take us up to the corner. A lot of shop fronts like this, dotted in this area. And I love the doors. The doors are amazing. It's just beautiful woodwork. And then a lot of these little windows, which always have stained glass in them, above. Okie dokie. Are there any comments or questions just to end with? Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. And in the description, if you want to make a donation, buy me a coffee or PayPal or that type of thing, you probably know where to find it. It's in the description. And yeah, I'll carry on next week. So let me just great. Okay. That's a pleasure, Michelle. Thanks for joining. And I'm going to go get some Indonesian takeaway, actually, since there's so many nice ones in this area. That's a pleasure. Tijssen, do send me your address and I'll get a slicey posted off to you. Graag gedaan, Natalie. And thank you, Sue. And what I'll do is, for saying goodbye, let's talk about saying goodbye. I have a very dear 93-year-old friend who was teaching me Dutch. And if I want to annoy her, I can say, instead of saying goodbye, you should say dag. I go doei or doeg, which doesn't really sit so well with her. I mean, she loves me, so she puts up with it. But so if you want to say goodbye to friends in this country, you go doei or doeg. If you're saying goodbye to somebody you want to be a little bit more polite about it, you go dag. So dag, everybody, and see you next week, hopefully. Bye.